Well, we are wrapping up the month of January, which tends to be the wettest month throughout parts of Northern California. Dry January, but only for some. Take a look at these beautiful pictures up at Palisades, Tahoe. This was the snow that fell as we wrapped up the month, and well-needed snow as well. Folks were enjoying the fluffy white snow as it came down, and of course everybody hitting the slopes as well. Since it was safe to do so, it was a nice steady snowfall and a nice accumulation as well up there in the high country. Well, this is what it looks like up at Kingvale right now. Snow still falling periodically, but traffic moving rather smoothly. We've seen a mix of rain and snow at the lower elevations, mostly snow here at I-80 at Kingvale. Now, as we head into the I-80 Highway 50 corridor there, the interchange, that Y where we go to Highway 89 or to Highway 50, you can see traffic moving really smoothly. The roads are clear. Not a whole lot of snowfall at South Lake Tahoe. Those temperatures started off really warm, generally sitting in the 40s for much of yesterday, so it was kind of hard to get some big snowfall numbers coming in there. Here's a look at our storm rain totals. These will continue to go up because we're still tracking areas of rain right now. But Grass Valley with over 1.5 inches of rain, over 2 inches for Vacaville, Sacramento Executive nearly 1 inch of rain. Slightly under that for Stockton, Modesto, over 1 inch of rain in the northern San Joaquin Valley. A look at those snow numbers, and we've got about 5 to 10 inches in general for many of the ski resorts. Again, wrapping up January, which has tended to be a little bit on the drier side here. Statewide precipitation, our numbers look pretty good if we just look at the sheer numbers, but when we take a look at the deficits, they have continued to grow here. We picked up a little bit of steam yesterday, especially with that big atmospheric river coming through. Still above average for Modesto and Stockton, as well as Eureka, San Diego above average, watching for some flood risks that will increase, especially by the end of the weekend into early next week. Pretty powerful atmospheric river getting ready to roll on through. Rest of the state right around 1/2 inch below normal to slightly over 1 inch or so below normal. January, as I mentioned, tends to be one of our wettest months, and you can see how we climb during the fall season into the beginning of winter, and then we start to really see those numbers drop off, especially by April and May. March can tend to be one of those wetter months. We'll call it a miracle March if we've happened to be rather dry for the beginning of the season. Total rainfall for Sacramento Executive, which has the longest running climatology for Sacramento, is at 18.14 inches for the total rainfall on average. We're a little bit below that right now. Looking at just sheer rain totals for the month of January, again, these numbers look pretty good. We had to do a lot of catching up because November and December came in a little bit dry for some folks. Not everybody, but some. So numbers wise, we were anywhere from about 3.5 inches to 4.5 inches just for that month alone. So Modesto, big winner there with over 2 inches above average for just January. Stockton over 1 inch above normal, but downtown Sacramento and Sacramento Executive just falling a little bit behind. And those numbers really indicate when we see some of those stronger cells sitting over a particular area, those numbers can go up. So December happened to be a little bit wetter for downtown Sacramento and Sacramento Executive. In fact, the wettest days of the water year so far in December, where we had over 1 inch to 1.5 inches of rain. Now that translated into January for Stockton and Modesto, where you can see January 22nd. The wettest days with about 1 inch to 1.25 inches on that day alone, helping to drive up those January numbers. So again, rainfall totals looking fairly decent. All right, let's talk about snow right now, where you can see Lake Tahoe on average tends to have its snowiest month in January. Then things start to fall off. Now, what's interesting about the Sierra is we tend to hold on to that average snowfall in at least the decent range through March. Then it just absolutely plummets in April. It's not a nice, steady, slow decline. It's just a rather marked drop off by March into April. And then by May, virtually nothing in the way of snowfall, but we will get some precipitation. Tracking the Sierra snow, let's break it down by resorts. And this is just to give you a little snapshot of what we've been seeing. For Sugar Bowl, that's going to be right to the south of I-80, right around the Donner Pass area. It sits at about 8,300 feet. So far, we've had 165 inches of snow. The season average is 500 inches. Now, I wanted to break it down a little bit more into detail. So I took a look at the beginning of the water year, October 1st through December 31st. We had 33 inches of snow. Then in the month of January alone, and this just really doubles down on how much January is critical for our water year. We got 86 inches. Again, that was just in January. So the snowiest day was January 14th. A couple of other resorts, because obviously we have different elevations and we have different signatures of those atmospheric rivers that come in. So some are a little more poised to the north, some are a little bit more poised to the south. So wanted to give a really good picture of what's going on in the central and northern Sierra. Palisades, Tahoe, you just saw the images moments ago, 130 inches so far. Season average is about 400 inches. So again, this would fall in line October 1st through December 31st, about 42 inches. We nearly doubled that in the month of January alone. The snowiest days on the 7th and 14th. Sierra at Tahoe. Now, this resort sits on Highway 50. We didn't get a whole lot of snow with this last weather system that went through, and you can see how the numbers really shift here. We got 103 inches so far. Average is about 400 inches. There's that October 1st through December 31st precipitation, 23 inches, whereas in the month of January, we got 47, well below some of those 80 plus inches that we saw at some of those other ski resorts. Our snowiest day, a little bit earlier in the month, on January 3rd. That ski resort, the highest peaks at about 8,800 feet. Here we are at Kirkwood. These numbers decent so far, 121 inches. And you may be thinking, wait, these numbers aren't adding up, Monica. Well, I do want to mention that we did have a little bit of precipitation since midnight, since this is February 1st. So these numbers are going to fluctuate ever so slightly. 120 inches, 21 inches so far. Average is about 354 by the time we get through the season. So our snowiest days go back to January 3rd and 7th. And again, we didn't have a ton of snow at Kirkwood in the month of January. We actually saw quite a lot, October 1st through December 31st. Next, we'll take a look at Mammoth Mountain. That's along 395 and has some of the highest peaks, over 11,000 feet. Generally, they just get hammered with snow. We have the snowiest season on record last year for Mammoth Mountain. 110 inches so far, and again, average is about 400 inches. Our snowiest day was January 11th at 75 inches. We had about 33 inches for the October, November, and December total. So again, those are just some snapshots of some of the ski resorts, just showing the varying conditions that we can have throughout the Sierra. So it's so critical that we kind of share those water resources throughout the Sierra. Speaking of water, we had some small but positive changes to our snow water equivalent. On January 2nd, it was looking really thin up through the Sierra. And then fast forward to our current look at that snow water equivalent, the contour is not only expanding in its region, but also looking at some different colors. And that's indicative of a much different snowpack up there. It supplies a third of our state water needs. Once that snow starts to melt down, it fills our reservoirs through runoff. We do have other resources like surface water, groundwater, and imports, but this is free to us, basically. The snowpack is our free savings account. It just kind of meters off slowly into our reservoirs, and then we can really distribute it as needed. Now, precipitation type really matters. This is the Central Sierra Snow Lab. That's up at Soda Springs, which, by the way, is pretty close to Sugar Bowl. So far, precipitation to date of snowfall is 64%. So snowfall-wise, 64%. Total precipitation, 75% of average. Some of that falling as rain. Rain is fine. We're not going to discount any rain in California, but what really helps us is when we see that snowpack stay in the Sierra until roughly about April 1st. You can see the Department of Water Resources taking these beautiful images across the Sierra. This was when they did their second snow survey of the year. If you've always been wondering, well, how did they do this? They literally do this by manual count. They put the snowshoes on, they go out to Phillips Station, and there you see it. They're putting the big snow tube into the snowpack. They'll then pull that snow tube out, and they're going to measure what is in that snow tube, not only for the depth of the snow tube, and I want you to keep a close eye on when they pull that out. They're actually going to weigh that. So here you have it. Steve Guzman checking that out, and then he's going to weigh that and see how much the weight is, how much water, if we were to take that entire tube, melt it down, how much water would we be able to get from that snow tube? That's just one of the monitoring stations, but we have multiple stations throughout the entire Sierra. As you can see, our snow water equivalent right now in the northern Sierra, 65% of average. Some good news there. It was sitting really low until we got these series of storms coming through in January. Central Sierra, 52% of average, and then the southern Sierra is at 39% of average. That's going to put our statewide average at 53%. So again, this was the second snow survey of the year. We had the first one on January 2nd. At that particular monitoring site, 30% of average statewide was at 28%. And then those series of storms came through in January. That's what I'm saying. It really helped us. Small but positive changes. At Phillips Station, 58% of average. And then the statewide average on that January 30th date was sitting at 52% of average. Some great news there. Now, this is drastically different than what we saw last year at this time. Our year-to-year February snow survey last year, we were at 214% of average. This year, obviously, 52% of average. So you can see how the snow depth quite a bit different, not to mention the type of snow that fell as well. Type of snow really matters when it comes to how much we're actually able to extract with water from that snowpack. So it's really critical. And since we're talking about that melting snow into our reservoirs, I just wanted to take a quick snapshot also of how things are sitting. All of these reservoirs doing a really healthy job of not only keeping some of that water, but also releasing some of it. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Shasta, our biggest one, that feeds the Sacramento River, is at 80% full right now, 122% of average. Oroville, that's going to flow into the Feather River, 76% of 76% full, 132% of average. Folsom, which is part of the American River stream, is at 55% full, 120% of average. I do want to note that all of those rivers flow right into downtown Sacramento. Shasta will release into the Sacramento River, flows right downstream. Oroville releasing into the Feather River, which will connect to the Sacramento River, will meet in downtown Sacramento. And then Folsom releasing into the American River, again, meeting in downtown Sacramento. That's why we have such a huge flood risk here and why we pay such close attention to all of this. All right, next up, let's take a look at the Central Sierra. New Melones, 82% full, Don Pedro, 81, and San Luis, 61. All of this will continue to flow into the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So keep a close eye on that, except for San Luis. That's a little bit farther to the south there as we head into parts of the South Bay area. All right, here's a look at Oroville. Flood control releases are happening. Let me show you the rush of water coming out, 12,000 cubic feet per second being released. Now, the Department of Water Resources has to do this for the state, basically, because it's feeding over 20 million people throughout the state. This is the state's largest reservoir in the project that they have. And so to make sure that we don't have downstream communities that are at risk of flooding, they have to do these very controlled releases. Let some water out. Woo! Wow. And then keep some of it in as well for the dry season. I mentioned how wet it was last year. And I want to show you the comparison of what we had last year and why it's so imperative and kind of tenuous for that water balance in Lake Oroville and from many of our reservoirs. Here's the red line right here. This is how much water we had last year melting into the reservoir. You can see at April 1st, we really see those numbers start to climb. That's when we see some of the peak snow melt happening all the way through about May. Now, we had a little bit of a delayed effect last year because we had some late season storms, and then we really didn't start that big warm up until a little bit later in the season. It was ideal, actually, because we got those big releases coming in, really holding that water when we have peak demand for the water. And so then they can slowly release it and get ready for the next water year, which started right here. So you can see these dots right here are going to line up pretty closely here. We see a little bit of a drop as they continue to release, getting ready for the winter season. And then they'll just kind of let it sit there until we have a better handle on how many atmospheric rivers are coming in, how much snow, how much rain, etc. And then they'll let that rise a little bit. But the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a pretty strict stop zone for flood control and flood risk. And then at that point, you got to start those releases. So there's still plenty of water in there. There's more coming our way. We're going to have more extended forecasts just like this, so you can stay up to date on our next atmospheric river, which has more risk for flooding throughout the state of California. But that is a wrap on January, our typically wettest and snowiest month in Northern California.